My son told me he couldn't afford a loaf of bread. 3 days later, his wife posted her diamond bracelet on Instagram. They laughed in a house I owned, bought groceries I never touched. I raised him, fed him, housed him. But when I needed help, I was too much. So I sold the house they lived in, and didn't say goodbye. Alright, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Evelyn stared at the image glowing on her phone screen. Candace, lips pursed in a perfect smile, holding up her wrist like a showroom mannequin. The caption read, "Early anniversary surprise. #grateful #married life." Below it, rows of red hearts and fire emojis from friends who had no idea. 3 days earlier, Evelyn had sent a text to her son. Just 4 items: milk, bread, bananas, eggs, that was all. No meats, no indulgences, just the basics. Todd had responded in under a minute. "We're stretched thin right now, sorry. Next week maybe." She hadn't replied. Just set the phone down and stared at the nearly bare shelf in her fridge, where only a half-empty jar of pickles and some baking soda kept company in the light. The milk had soured. The bread was gone. The bananas, never bought. She hadn't asked much. And maybe for a moment she believed he really was tight on money. He always was, always had a reason. Todd had been tight on money when he skipped college tuition payments, tight on money when he moved back in with Candace and brought credit card debt with him. But diamonds? Evelyn stood in front of the fridge again that afternoon, the cold air brushing her cheeks like a quiet scolding. She closed the door without taking anything out. Even the hum of the appliance sounded like a question she didn't want to answer. Sunday morning brought a sliver of sun, and the quiet shuffle of slippers on tile. Evelyn dressed slowly. Slacks, pressed blouse, her late husband's cross pin on her cardigan. Church wasn't just ritual. It was the one place she didn't feel like someone's obligation. Doris Flynn waved her down from the back pew, saving her a seat with a folded bulletin. Sharp-eyed, silver-haired, and always clutching a purse like she might need to smack someone with it. Doris was Evelyn's closest confidant. After the service, the 2 women sat in the church hall, the scent of percolated coffee and lemon bars thick in the air. Evelyn hesitated, then told her everything. The list, Todd's text, Candace's post. Doris didn't blink. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You're feeding 2 mouths that wouldn't give you crumbs if you were starving on the sidewalk." "I know," Evelyn murmured. "No," Doris said, her voice dropping. "I mean, really think about that. You gave them a place to live, and they can't give you bananas?" The words sank deep, coating Evelyn's ribs like something heavier than regret. She started. "You just what? Thought they'd grow up?" "People like that don't grow up. They grow roots in other people's generosity." Back home, Evelyn stepped into the spare bedroom, the one her husband Wayne had always called his quiet room. It still held his books, his antique desk, the old oak filing cabinet she hadn't opened in years. The carpet still carried the faint scent of pipe tobacco. She crouched slowly, joints crackling, and opened the bottom drawer. Dust tickled her nose. Her fingers brushed over yellowed documents, a few bank statements, some tax returns, then a red folder. The label read, "Dioplex deed. More." Evelyn pulled it out, heart beginning to pound with a strange rhythm. The papers inside were crisp despite their age. Her name clearly typed in black ink. Evelyn Marie Moore, sole owner. The signature, notarized. The date 2 months after Wayne passed. They'd never changed it. Never asked. She sat back on her heels, the file open across her lap. For a moment the room went still. No sound but the faint ticking of the wall clock, and her own breath, steady but sharpening. A quiet flush of realization moved through her, warm and startling. They lived there because she allowed it. They stayed because she had not said otherwise. They assumed. Evelyn stood, knees stiff, and walked the folder to the dining table. She placed it down gently, like setting a chess piece. Then she opened her phone and scrolled to her contacts. One name blinked back at her: Marcy Nguyen, probate attorney. Her finger hovered, not trembling, but sure. The folder sat open on the dining table, the pages fanned out like a quiet weapon. Evelyn turned them slowly, carefully, as if afraid they'd crumble from disuse. But they didn't. The paper held its spine better than most people she knew. Tucked behind the property deed was another document, folded once, then again, the kind of folding someone does when they're hoping something will never be needed. She opened it with deliberate fingers. Her breath caught when she saw the heading. Residential rental agreement, month to month. Her name was on the top line as landlord. Todd's signature, young and cocky in its curves, marked the bottom. Candace hadn't signed. She wasn't in the picture then. Evelyn sat down, letting the weight of the page press into her palm. She could still hear Wayne's voice that day, gentle but firm. We'll keep it simple, month to month, just something in writing so we're covered. He'd said it like a practical man who loved his family but didn't trust luck. Evelyn had nodded then, not realizing how sharp his foresight really was. Now rereading the clause midway down, the one in plain language, no legalese, she felt a stillness settle over her. The landlord reserves the right to terminate the agreement with 30 days' notice in writing. No lease term, no renewal conditions, just her name, the address and full rights to revoke. She reached for her phone and scrolled to Marcy Nguyen's number. Evelyn. Marcy answered, cheerful as ever. What can I do for you? I need a second look at the duplex papers. There's a lease Wayne and I drew up, informal but signed. There was a pause, a shift in Marcy's tone. You're thinking about selling? I'm thinking about remembering who owns the roof they live under. A soft chuckle on the other end. Send me a scan. If it's what I think it is, you have full rights to do whatever you want with that property. Evelyn stood and moved toward the kitchen counter where the printer sat, dusty but ready. The old machine groaned when it warmed up, but it scanned the lease just fine. She attached the PDF to an email with a short note and clicked send. By early evening, the wind had picked up, maple leaves scraping across her porch like small creatures in a hurry. Doris appeared just after sunset, wrapped in a navy shawl and gripping a thermos. Brought mulled cider, she said. Didn't figure you'd say no. They sat in the front room as the dusk deepened outside, the warm cinnamon sugar scent curling through the air like memory. Evelyn handed her the lease to read. Doris didn't speak until she hit the final clause. She gave a slow nod. Well, well. They never read it, did they? Wayne wanted it casual, but documented. Just in case, he said. Smart man, Doris said, folding the paper with care. They think because you've been quiet, you've been passive. Time to remind them whose roof they sleep under. Evelyn stared at the living room wall where photos hung. Todd at 13 with braces and big dreams. Wayne beside the boat he'd never got to sail. Candace was nowhere on the wall. Evelyn had never added her. I'm tired of being quiet, she said, not loudly, but finally. An email pinged. Evelyn rose and walked to the computer. It was from Marcy. Subject re-duplex lease message. All reviewed, the agreement holds. You have legal grounds to sell and remove tenants with 30 days notice. Question, would you like me to prepare the property for listing? The rain came down in a slow needling drizzle, the kind that soaked through sleeves before you realized it. Evelyn pulled her worn windbreaker tighter, the hood flapping with each gust. Her canvas tote bumped against her hip as she walked the 3 blocks to the discount grocer, the sidewalk slick and glistening under the muted sky. Her knees ached. She felt each step in her joints. A quiet reminder that 71 didn't walk like 60. But she didn't complain, not out loud. As she reached the corner, the traffic light blinked red, and Evelyn paused at the crosswalk, waiting for the change. That's when she spotted them. Across the street, outside fresh and foraged, the upscale market with polished stone counters and herb-scented air. Todd and Candace stood beneath a striped awning. Candace wore a cream trench coat and oversized sunglasses, though the sun had been absent all day. She held a green smoothie in one manicured hand, laughing, full-bodied, performative, like someone trying to be overheard. Todd carried a reusable bag overflowing with gourmet items, baguettes, fresh herbs, a glint of imported cheese wrapping visible at the top. Evelyn's feet stayed planted on the wet concrete. The light changed. She didn't move. Candace kissed Todd's cheek, then turned her phone toward them, angling for a selfie. Evelyn watched the flash blink. Another post. Another parade. She crossed the street quickly, eyes lowered. They didn't see her. The inside of Family Foods smelled of damp cardboard and old onions. Evelyn grabbed a red handbasket and started her short list. Store-brand peanut butter, day-old bread, generic soup, a dozen eggs if they weren't cracked. She moved with quiet efficiency, one hand clutched around a folded strip of paper coupons, clipped from this week's mailer. At checkout, the teenage cashier barely looked up. Evelyn slid her snap card across the reader. It buzzed, then beeped again. "Sorry, ma'am. It didn't go through," the boy said. Monotone. Already reaching for a void slip. Evelyn's cheeks burned. She pulled out her coin purse, fingers trembling only slightly. Quarters, dimes, nickels. She counted them with the calm of someone who's done this before. "That'll do," the cashier muttered, handing her a crinkled receipt. Outside, she tucked the groceries into her tote with care. Plastic-wrapped loaf. 2 cans of soup. No eggs. They'd been too expensive, even with the coupon. Dinner was silent. She set one slice of bread in the toaster, watching the coil glow red through the metal grate. The kitchen smelled faintly of rust and reheated dust. She stirred the soup on the stove, metal spoon tapping the sides of the saucepan like a ticking clock. The first bite burned her tongue. She ate it anyway. Doris called just after 7. Evelyn let it ring twice before answering. "How was the day?" Doris asked. "Wet," Evelyn said. "Managed groceries. You shouldn't have to walk in that weather," Doris said, voice prickling with something sharp and maternal. "I needed the walk," Evelyn replied. "It cleared my head." There was a pause. Doris didn't press, but Evelyn could feel the concern through the line. "Tomorrow, come by for tea," Doris finally said. "We'll split a cinnamon roll and pretend we're not surrounded by fools." "I'd like that," Evelyn said, and meant it. Later that night, after she'd washed the lone plate and folded the dish towel just so, she sat in her recliner and opened her phone. A notification glowed. "At Candace Moore tagged you in a post." She hesitated, then tapped it. A photo loaded, Candace radiant in a cream blouse, holding a champagne flute in one hand, and showing off her diamond-studded wrist in the other. Todd sat beside her, grinning. The caption, "Diamonds and mimosas with my ride-or-die #brunch vibes #married life #blessed." Evelyn stared at the screen, the reflection of her own tired face staring back in the glass. She didn't blink, her thumb hovered, and then she pressed unfollow. The oven timer buzzed softly beneath the gospel music humming from the kitchen radio. Evelyn slid on her worn oven mitts, opened the door, and was immediately wrapped in the scent of rosemary, lemon and garlic. The roast chicken was golden glistening. Her late husband would have smiled and called it a Sunday miracle. She'd invited Todd and Candace 4 days earlier. A polite text, short and sweet. "Sunday dinner? 5 o'clock. Just us." Todd replied within the hour. "Sounds good. Looking forward to it." No emojis, no excuses. By noon she'd mashed the potatoes by hand, added just the right amount of butter, not margarine, and simmered green beans with bacon and onion, the way her mother used to. The lemon pie chilled on the top rack of the fridge, crust flaking perfectly at the edges. She'd even ironed the tablecloth. The good one, white linen with scallop trim. Candace always noticed things like that, and Evelyn had wanted her to notice. By 4:45, the table was set for 4. She lit 2 taper candles and dimmed the lights just enough for warmth. The chicken rested in its pan, juices settling. A pitcher of iced tea sat ready. At 5:03, Evelyn smoothed her blouse and looked out the front window. At 5:17 she checked her phone. No calls, no texts. By 5:30, the mashed potatoes had lost their steam. At 5:46, she blew out one of the candles. The other flickered stubbornly, as if refusing to admit what was already clear. She stood by the sink and watched the steam from the green beans coil into the air like smoke from something burnt. Her chest didn't ache, not quite, but the silence had weight. At 6:12, Evelyn sat down alone and filled her plate. A modest serving. Chicken thigh. 1 scoop of potatoes. 2 spoonfuls of beans. She said grace with her eyes closed and her voice quiet. Amen, she whispered. The first bite was still warm. She chewed slowly, deliberately. She would not cry. She would not curse. She would eat what she cooked, because someone should. Outside, a car passed, tires hissing against damp asphalt. Inside, the only sound was her fork against china. By 6:48, she was rinsing dishes, one by one. Her back ached slightly, but she stood tall, her movements efficient. The leftovers were divided neatly into Tupperware, 1 for the fridge, 2 for the freezer. The pie remained untouched. She wrapped it carefully in plastic and slid it back into the fridge without a word. The tablecloth came off next. She folded it slowly, smoothing each crease. She didn't bother checking her phone again. At 8:03, Doris called. How was the dinner? Evelyn hesitated. Quiet. They didn't come. No message. Nothing. The line stayed silent for a beat. Then Doris exhaled, low and sharp. You cooked, didn't you? Roast chicken, pie, the works. That girl wouldn't know a homemade meal if it bit her on the wrist between diamonds. Evelyn chuckled, not from humor, but from the sharp truth in it. Don't you dare do it again, Doris said. I mean it, Evelyn. Don't give where it don't grow. I won't, Evelyn said. And this time she believed herself. She changed into pajamas and sat in bed with a book she didn't open. The candle scent lingered faintly. Lavender and something else she couldn't name. The freezer hummed. Her phone stayed silent. Outside, the wind shook the trees gently, like someone unsure whether to leave or stay. At 8:12 the next morning, her phone buzzed. Candace, was that dinner this Sunday? Our bad. Totally slipped our minds. Evelyn stared at the screen for a long time before setting it face down on the table. She didn't reply. She just stood up, walked to the sink, and turned on the hot water. Hot enough to sting. The real estate office smelled faintly of espresso and printer toner, the kind of sterile calm that cloaked decisions people rarely reversed. Evelyn sat across from Marcy Nguyen in a glass-walled conference room downtown, a soft gray rain tapping rhythmically against the windows. Marcy slid the draft listing agreement across the table. We'll keep everything clean. The LLC will be listed as the owner, Birch Rock Holdings. You stay anonymous. They'll never know it's you selling until the notice arrives. Evelyn didn't blink. Perfect. She signed with slow, steady strokes. Her name, her initials, date. Finality in black ink. Marcy tucked the forms into a manila envelope. Once photos are done, we'll push it live on the private agent network. No public signs. No neighborhood buzz. And the LLC? Evelyn asked. Filed this morning, Marcy replied. Registered to my P.O. box, like we discussed. Evelyn sipped the lukewarm tea Marcy had offered earlier. It was weak, but warm. It felt right, like the kind of thing you drink before turning a page and never looking back. The next morning, Doris arrived with a scarf tied around her curls and a bottle of lemon-scented wood polish in one hand. Let's make this place sparkle, she said, rolling up her sleeves. Stage it like you're about to host Oprah. They moved through Evelyn's half of the duplex first. Doris fluffed pillows, arranged throw blankets. Evelyn opened curtains and wiped down baseboards. The living room smelled of lemon and lavender by the time they finished. Then they moved to the other side. Todd and Candace had left for the day, as they often did mid-morning. Errands, brunch, whatever filled their curated lifestyle. Evelyn glanced around. Dishes in the sink. A half-finished jigsaw puzzle on the coffee table. Candace's vision board. Magazine clippings and gold-foiled quotes hung above the fireplace. They live like they own the place, Doris muttered, straightening a crooked frame. Evelyn's response was quiet but certain. Not for much longer. The photographer arrived an hour later. Young, polite, with soft-soled sneakers and a quiet camera. He worked quickly, moving through each room like a shadow. Evelyn watched from the hallway as he snapped wide shots of the kitchen, the natural light playing nicely off the quartz countertop. Upgrades she hadn't approved, but didn't mind now that they made the property more valuable. That evening, Evelyn sat on the porch with a cup of chamomile as the sun dipped low. The air was cool, laced with the scent of someone's backyard fire pit nearby. Todd walked up the drive, keys jangling, wearing his usual too-casual grin. "Hey May," he said, stretching his arms. "We're thinking about remodeling the guest bath soon. Candace found this amazing tile from Spain, like reclaimed stuff. Real rustic." Evelyn looked up slowly, blinking once. "Sounds ambitious." "Yeah. Well, we want to modernize the space. Add some value, you know?" She nodded, blowing on her tea. "Of course. Always good to think long-term." The next day, Candace barged in with a paint swatch fan in one hand and a latte in the other. She dropped onto the arm of Evelyn's chair like they were close. "We're thinking grage, or maybe a muted sage," she chirped, flipping the fan. "Pinterest is full of ideas for transitional interiors. I want it to feel modern but still, like, grounded." Evelyn smiled, sipped her tea and said, "Well, you've always had an eye for temporary things." Candace didn't catch it. She was already snapping a photo of the swatches. That evening, Evelyn sat at her desk, the window cracked just enough to let in the rustle of leaves. Her laptop pinged. New message. Marcy Nguyen subject. Offer on Birch Rock listing. She opened the email, heart steady. "We received a full cash offer from a local buyer. No contingencies. They'd like to close in 3 weeks. I've attached the contract for your review. Let me know if you're ready." The tip of Evelyn's pen hovered half a second above the dotted line, the only sound in the office the faint whir of the overhead fan and the ticking of the antique wall clock. Then, a smooth final stroke. She handed the signed purchase agreement back to Marcy, who slid it into a folder like she was sealing a secret between old friends. "It's done," Marcy said softly. "Buyer wired the earnest deposit this morning. Full cash. No inspection clause. They want both units vacated by the end of the month." Evelyn leaned back in the leather chair, spine straight, fingers resting calmly on the edge of the table. 30 days, she said. "That's plenty." Outside, the world carried on. Buses hissed at red lights and pigeons circled the courthouse steps. But inside that office, Evelyn felt still. Centered, unshakable. By afternoon, Doris was in Evelyn's living room with 2 cardboard boxes and a permanent marker. "We're decluttering, not moving yet," Doris said, scribbling "keep sentimental" across one box. "But no reason you should still have 6 ice trays in a drawer when you only use one." Evelyn chuckled, reaching for the dusty cookie tin under the coffee table. "That one's full of old receipts." They worked in comfortable silence, broken only by Doris grumbling about tangled cords and Evelyn holding up a pair of gardening gloves with a look of mild disbelief. "Those aren't even yours," Doris said, pointing. "Todd left those behind 3 summers ago and never once asked about them." "They won't be coming with me," Evelyn said. The following morning, Todd leaned casually against the kitchen doorframe, sipping from a mug Evelyn hadn't seen since last Christmas. "Candace found a contractor," he said. "Breezy as ever. We're finally going to do the deck this spring, right off the back door. Real cedar. We'll host summer cookouts. You'll love it." Evelyn didn't look up from her crossword. A deck sounds ambitious. "Candace's idea. She's already got the Pinterest board. You'll see," Todd said, pushing off the doorframe like he had a plan for everything except who actually paid for the wood. "Glad you're thinking ahead," Evelyn replied, circling the word consequence on the puzzle. 2 nights later, Evelyn sat by the window, sorting through old photographs while Doris wrapped bubble tape around a porcelain teapot. "How's it feel?" Doris asked, not looking up. "Quiet," Evelyn said. "But good quiet. You haven't told them, have you?" "No. Let them keep measuring for a deck then," Doris muttered. Just make sure you're measuring for freedom. Evelyn smiled and held up a photo of her and Wayne on the front lawn, his arm slung around her shoulder. Her laugh captured mid-burst. The duplex in the background, still freshly painted then. She didn't feel guilt. She felt a gentle ache, like something old being let go at last. The final paperwork came through in a slim envelope the next morning. Evelyn signed the closing documents with hands that didn't shake. Marcy stopped by that afternoon to notarize them. I'll file it with the county by Friday, Marcy said, placing the documents into her leather satchel. The buyer's moving fast, and frankly, I love it for you. Evelyn offered her a short nod. Thank you for making it quiet. Marcy smiled. Quiet is power, Evelyn. Later that evening, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table with a warm cup of coffee, steam curling gently into the golden afternoon light. The mug had a chip on the handle, a small imperfect scar she'd always liked. Todd's voice floated in from the other side of the wall, muffled by drywall and poor decisions. Might add a pergola too, if the bonus comes through. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment. Let the words pass. Let them fade. Then she reached for her phone to check the time and saw a text notification blinking on her screen. Credit union. Deposit alert. $427,000 received from Birch Rock Holdings LLC. Evelyn stared at the number, not with shock, but with a slow, rising calm. She took a long sip of coffee and whispered, "That'll do just fine." Todd was in her kitchen again. Not invited, never formally welcome, just there, like always. A sponge in his hand, rinsing the one cereal bowl he'd used, humming like the place belonged to him. Evelyn stepped in quietly. Her slippers made no sound on the tile, but something in the air shifted. Todd looked up, smiled. "Morning, Ma. We're heading out in a bit. Candace wants to look at patio heaters. She's got this whole plan for the deck, might even do a fire pit now." Evelyn set a crisp envelope on the counter between them. White, unlabeled, heavy with intent. Todd blinked. "What's this?" "Your 30-day notice to vacate," she said evenly. He laughed. Not a chuckle. A deep, confused bark of disbelief. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn didn't move. "The house has been sold. You'll need to be out by the 1st. He picked up the envelope like it might be a prank. Tore it open, scanned the typed letter. The color drained from his face. "You're kicking us out." His voice cracked halfway through. "You're serious?" "I'm honoring the lease," Evelyn replied. "You remember the lease. Month to month. 30 days notice. It's in writing." But Todd shook his head. "We've been here for years. This is our home. You can't just." "I can. I have." The air thickened like a storm rolling in. Footsteps clacked down the hall. Candace, in heeled boots and a faux fur vest, came in holding her phone. "What's going on?" she asked, eyes flicking between them. Evelyn nodded toward the paper in Todd's hand. "She sold the house," he said, voice low and flat. "She's evicting us." Candace's face twisted like she'd tasted something foul. "You're joking." Evelyn said nothing. "You're really doing this?" Candace's tone turned sharp, theatrical. "After everything we've done for you?" Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Like forgetting dinner? Like ignoring my grocery list while buying diamond bracelets? Like remodeling my property without permission?" Candace took a step forward. "This is betrayal. This house isn't a reward," Evelyn said coolly. "It's a responsibility. One you never respected." Todd dropped the envelope on the counter like it had burned his hand. "This is insane. We were going to improve the place. Add value." Evelyn shrugged. "The new owners will handle that." "Who are they?" he demanded. "I didn't ask their names." A pause. "They paid in cash." For a long beat no one spoke. Then the back door creaked open. Doris stood there leaning against the frame, arms crossed, watching it all unfold with quiet, deadly calm. "You heard her," Doris said. "You've got 30 days. And from what I hear, rentals in Rochester are filling fast." Candace's eyes flashed. "You don't get to stand there and act righteous." "I get to stand where I want," Doris snapped, "because I earned my place. Same as Evelyn did. You You just squatted and smiled. Todd's chest heaved. So what now? You just expect us to disappear? Evelyn picked up her tea mug and walked past him without flinching. I expect you to pack. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the porch chimes. The scent of rain teased the edge of the air, and the sky folded into a moody blue-gray. Candace's voice rose behind Evelyn as she reached the doorway. This isn't over, she snarled. Evelyn turned her head just enough to respond. No, she said, voice calm as polished steel. But it's ending. And then she shut the door behind her. Slow, final, and without looking back. Todd stood on her porch, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, face twisted into the expression he used whenever he needed something. The faux remorseful one, mouth tight, eyes squinting like he might be the real victim. I've been thinking, he started, rocking slightly on his heels. Maybe we haven't handled things perfectly, but we don't have to throw the whole thing away. Evelyn didn't respond. She sat on the porch swing, legs crossed at the ankle, a paperback resting face down on her lap. The wood creaked as she shifted slightly. Todd took that as a welcome. What if we started paying real rent? He asked. Like, market rate, on paper. I'll even sign something official. Cancel the sale, and we'll handle this like adults. Evelyn turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. You want to pay now? Yes. We're serious this time. Todd said, we'll take better care of the place. You won't have to lift a finger. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't buy me groceries, Todd. That was different. We were going through. No, she cut in. You said you were broke. Then Candace posted a tennis bracelet. Todd's mouth opened, closed. Behind him, the screen door banged open. Candace stepped out, all eyeliner and indignation. Okay, this is getting ridiculous. You're acting like we abandoned you on the side of the road. Evelyn stood, slowly smoothing her skirt. You abandoned me at the dinner table. You ghosted messages. You smiled when I was struggling and you were thriving, off me. Candace scoffed. God, you're so dramatic. What do you want, a thank you card? You gave us a roof. That's what parents do. Doris's voice rang out from the other end of the porch, cool and firm. What parents do is teach consequences. Seems she's doing that now. Candace jumped slightly, not having noticed Doris sitting there, shaded by the wide umbrella of the porch overhang. She had her knitting in her lap, but she wasn't looking at it. Her eyes were locked on Candace. Unblinking, Evelyn stepped down onto the path, just one step closer to them. You two never had a lease. You stayed here under my grace. That grace has run out. We thought Todd tried. That's the problem. You thought wrong. There was a long windless pause. Even the leaves held still, waiting. Candace folded her arms. You're really going to toss us out like we're garbage? You're being tossed, Doris interrupted, or being told to walk after years of eating someone else's bread. Todd looked down at the wooden planks, his voice quieter now. You're really okay with making us homeless? Evelyn tilted her head. You're not homeless. You're adults, married, employed as far as I know. This is a transition, one you chose by never stepping up. Candace huffed. You'll regret this. No, Evelyn said, her voice soft but immovable. I've regretted staying silent. Not anymore. Todd shoved his hands deeper in his coat. You've changed, Ma. This isn't you. Evelyn looked him squarely in the eyes. This is me, just not the version you could guilt anymore. They turned to leave, no goodbyes, just brittle anger hanging in the air like broken glass. The porch swing creaked again as Evelyn sat back down. She picked up her book, not to read, just to feel it resting in her hands. Doris didn't say anything at first. She watched them walk to their side of the duplex, whispering too loudly, hands flailing in small fits of desperation. Then she turned to Evelyn. You good? Evelyn nodded once, slowly. I'm finally okay. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out without much interest. Credit union, final wire received, funds posted to checking. She exhaled like someone taking a breath they hadn't trusted until now. Okay, she said again. Period. The pen felt colder than usual in Evelyn's hand, and heavier too, like it knew the weight of what it was about to end. The conference room at Marcy's office was quiet, except for the muted scratch of paper sliding across the table. Sunlight pushed through the frosted windows in dull streaks, catching the edge of the deed transfer form. "All set?" Marcy asked gently, her tone respectful but firm. Evelyn nodded. "Let's close the door." She pressed her signature down one final time, each letter neat and deliberate. It was done. Across the table, the buyer, a clean-cut woman in her early 40s wearing running shoes and a North Face jacket, offered a hand with a warm smile. "Thank you, Miss Moore. We've been looking for a place just like this. It's perfect for our folks." Evelyn shook her hand with a quiet grace. "Take care of it. It's been good to me." Back at the duplex, the moving truck's engine idled low in the driveway. Evelyn's half had been boxed up with quiet precision, her framed photos wrapped in newspaper, books lined tightly in cartons, marked with clean Sharpie, kitchen den craft supplies. Inside, the air felt thinner, echoey, like the house already knew she was leaving. One of the movers, a broad man with kind eyes, lifted the last piece of her sewing table through the front door. Doris supervised from the porch like a general with a clipboard. "Don't let them stack my antiques sideways," Evelyn called from the living room. "We've got it, ma'am," the man grunted with a smile. "Everything's riding upright." Candace and Todd's side of the duplex, however, told a different story. Candace had been slamming kitchen drawers for an hour straight, her fury now unspooling in sharp bursts of disbelief. "I can't believe this," she hissed, dragging a suitcase across the tile. "The rentals in this town are a joke. $2,100 for a place with laminate floors and no walk-in closet. You think I'm not trying?" Todd snapped from the hallway, clutching his laptop and a crumpled lease application. "Every landlord wants references, credit checks. We weren't prepared for." "You weren't prepared," she shot back. "I was looking at marble tile 2 weeks ago. Now we're looking at listings with no dishwasher and mildew in the bathroom." Through the open windows, Evelyn heard it all. She stood in the yard now, under the shade of the sugar maple she and Wayne planted the year Todd turned 10. The branches had stretched high in the past 30 years, leaves already starting to rustle with early August wind. Doris joined her, arms crossed, a box of tea bags tucked beneath one arm like a prize. "They're packing like the deadline's a surprise," Doris muttered. "Can't say I'm shocked." Evelyn exhaled slowly. "I gave them time." "You gave them more than time," Doris said. "You gave them years." They stood quietly together, watching as Todd dragged a box labeled office to the sidewalk. Candace trailed behind him with a suitcase, designer purse swinging at her side. When the moving truck pulled away from Evelyn's side of the duplex, she didn't wave. She simply stepped forward, key ring in hand. One set, that's all she kept. The other two, the ones Todd and Candace had used like badges of entitlement, she placed inside a small padded envelope, walked up to the mailbox beside the real estate sign, slid the envelope in. And just like that, the house wasn't hers anymore. As the sun lowered, casting long shadows across the front lawn, Doris pulled Evelyn into a hug. "You ready for your new chapter?" she asked. Evelyn smiled, eyes soft. "I think I already turned the page." Doris chuckled. "Then I'll bring the bookmarks." Evelyn's phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She pulled it out, expecting a message from Marcy or the movers. Instead, it was a name she hadn't seen pop up in months. "Gerald, Credit Union." "Hi, Evelyn. Just wanted to confirm. The mortgage account has officially been paid off. No balance remains. You're free and clear." Evelyn reread the message twice, the words finally sinking beneath her ribs like warmth after a long storm. She glanced back at the house one last time, then whispered to no one in particular, "And now I owe no one." The new apartment didn't creak. It didn't hum or rattle or groan when the wind brushed the windows. It just sat still, waiting for Evelyn to claim it. She stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by unopened boxes and a sunbeam warming the laminate floors. The place was modest. Yes, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, But the walls were clean, the windows wide, and the silence. The silence was hers. No footsteps overhead. No raised voices through a shared wall. No whirring Vitamix at 6 a.m. Just stillness. Blessed, earned stillness. The first thing she unpacked was the small photo of Wayne, the one where he's grinning in front of their old fishing boat, sleeves rolled up, sunglasses perched on his forehead, like he'd just made a joke, and was waiting for her to laugh. She placed it on the windowsill, near the dining nook. The light caught his face just right. Evelyn gave it a small nod. There, she murmured. Best seat in the house. Then came the tea mugs. Not all, just two favorites. The one with a chipped rim she always used, and a deep blue one Doris had given her last Christmas. She stacked her sketch pads neatly beneath the bookshelf and arranged her watercolors in a tray by the kitchen window. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and it was enough. Doris arrived late afternoon with a lattice-topped cherry pie and a satisfied smirk. "You sure this place isn't too quiet for you?" she teased, stepping inside and giving the room a long once-over. "I'm adjusting," Evelyn said, her tone light. "I even heard myself think yesterday. Twice." Doris handed her the pie. "Then here's something to keep your thoughts sweet." They ate on the balcony, small paper plates in hand, legs stretched out under the fading summer sky. The city moved beneath them. Cars, sirens, children shouting in the distance, but up here Evelyn floated above it all. Detached. Free. "I don't hear them anymore," Evelyn said, half to herself. Doris took a bite of pie, chewed thoughtfully, then said, "That's not silence. That's peace." Evelyn smiled. She believed it now. That night she made a cup of chamomile and read the first 5 chapters of The Shell Seekers, a novel she'd meant to start 20 years ago. She didn't skim, she savored. The bed was soft, the pillows cool. For the first time in years, she didn't wake once. No angry doors, no late-night arguing, no microwave beeps through thin walls, just sleep. The next morning, Evelyn opened the blinds to pale sunlight and brewed coffee without urgency. She watered the fern Doris had insisted she needed. The radio murmured jazz in the background. Halfway through slicing a grapefruit, she heard the dull thud of something sliding under her door. A soft shuffle, then silence again. She walked to the door, hesitated, then bent to pick it up. A manila envelope, no return address. Just her name, in Todd's handwriting. Slanted, slightly rushed. She turned it over once, twice. No postage. Hand-delivered. Inside was weight. Not just physical, the kind of weight that slows your breath. She stood for a long moment, the envelope warm in her hand from her grip. The grapefruit sat forgotten on the counter, its juice beginning to bleed into the cutting board. Evelyn set the envelope on the table without opening it. She looked out the window instead, toward the sunrise, toward the quiet. Then softly, "I'm not in a hurry anymore." Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, the envelope open now, its contents unfolded with the kind of deliberate slowness one reserves for things that no longer hurt. The letter inside was handwritten on lined notebook paper, Todd's handwriting, all slants and uneven loops. At the top was the date, just 3 days old. She began reading, the edges of the paper crinkling beneath her fingers. "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking, more than you'd believe. This whole situation has been harder than we expected, and maybe we weren't fair to you. Maybe we didn't see what you were going through." Evelyn sipped her tea. The words didn't land like they used to. "Things got tight. Stress, inflation, you know. We didn't mean to let things get so bad. It wasn't personal. There was just a lot happening at once. Job stuff, bills, Candace's car repair." The paper smelled faintly of his cologne, the one Candace probably picked, sharp and artificial. "I guess what I'm saying is, we never meant to make you feel unimportant. We just didn't know how to juggle it all. Maybe if we'd communicated better, this whole thing wouldn't have gone sideways." Evelyn stopped there, folded the page back gently. She didn't need more. The pattern was as familiar as it was boring. The apology that blamed circumstances, the excuses dressed as insight. She flipped to the next sheet. A short addendum in Candace's unmistakable loopy script. We deserved better from you, Evelyn. You blindsided us. We thought family meant security, not betrayal. I hope you reflect on that someday. Evelyn gave a quiet snort, setting the letter on the table like it was a dirty dish she didn't feel like washing. The front door opened without knocking. Doris appeared in the frame, holding 2 scones in a paper bag and an expression that read, "Whatever it is, I'm ready." "I brought breakfast," in sarcasm, she said. "What's that look on your face?" Evelyn pushed the letter toward her with one finger. From Todd, and the echo of Candace. Doris sat down with a sigh, peering at the paper. She didn't read aloud, just skimmed, snorted, then leaned back with a laugh. "Frame it," she said. "Hang it above the toilet under a sign that says what not to do." Evelyn smiled. "Or line the birdcage I don't have. Better yet, burn it and toast marshmallows over the flames." They both laughed, short and real. Evelyn picked up the letter and walked it to the back room. She pulled open the bottom drawer of her little oak filing cabinet, the one with old tax returns and half-used notebooks. A tab inside read "Unfinished Business." She slipped the pages behind it without ceremony. Back at the table, she reached for the envelope again, intending to toss it, but something inside shifted weight. She turned it over and gave it a light shake. A folded check slipped out, fluttering down onto the placemat like a guilty bird. Evelyn stared at the amount. $36.84. Her eyes didn't blink. That was the exact amount she'd texted Todd months ago for groceries. Milk, bread, bananas, eggs. The week he said he was stretched thin. The week Candace posted the bracelet. The week Evelyn ate soup and toast while they drank mimosas. She picked it up gently, held it to the light. The ink was fresh, the signature real. Her fingers didn't tremble, but her jaw clenched with a sharp, involuntary reflex. Not from anger, but the cold absurdity of it. Doris, seeing her stillness, leaned forward. "What is it?" Evelyn turned the check toward her. Doris read it, whistled. "Well, that's one hell of a late grocery run." Evelyn walked to the counter, check in hand. She didn't tear it, didn't cash it. She placed it inside an empty jam jar. "Let it sit there," she said, "so I never forget what it cost them to feel generous." The jar sat on Evelyn's windowsill for 3 days, the check inside curling slightly from the sun. It looked ridiculous, that carefully written $36.84, resting between the glass and her memory, like a confession folded too late. By the fourth morning she'd had enough of looking at it. She took it out, slid it into her purse without a word, and walked 2 blocks to the credit union where Gerald Pike still greeted every customer like they were the only one who mattered. "Evelyn Moore," Gerald said with a bright grin, spotting her in line. "Retired troublemaker herself. What brings you in?" She smiled faintly. "I need this voided." He took the check, eyebrows lifting as he read the amount. "Huh. Kind of an exact figure. It's the price of 4 things I never got." Gerald didn't ask questions. He knew better than most how to listen without prying. He nodded and keyed in a few strokes on his keyboard. "Done. Voided. You're officially off their ledger." "Good," Evelyn said, tapping her fingers against the counter. "Now I'd like to start a new account." Gerald paused, then smiled slowly. "What kind?" She leaned in. "A travel fund." His grin deepened. "Now we're talking." Later that afternoon, Evelyn sat at her desk with a cup of mint tea, the scent fresh and sharp in the quiet room. Her laptop glowed with an open Amtrak page, the cursor blinking beside the words "Spring Saver Fares." Scenic routes. She scrolled until she found it. Empire Builder, St. Helt. Paul to Glacier National Park. Mountains, pines, solitude in motion. She selected a sleeper cabin, 1 window seat. Early April departure. Confirmed the ticket, then closed the tab with a smile that reached her eyes. That weekend, she and Doris walked to Griddle and Company, the cafe they'd claimed as theirs since it opened 10 years ago. The air was crisp, the sidewalks brushed with the scent of brewed coffee and warm syrup. "I made the reservation for us." Evelyn said over her BLT and sweet potato fries. For what? Doris asked, sipping her iced tea. Glacier National Park, April. Doris nearly choked. You're dragging me to Montana? Only if you don't shut up about it, Evelyn said with a wink. Doris laughed until her shoulders shook. I always said you were the unpredictable one. No, Evelyn said. I was the accommodating one. Now I'm just me. They fell into easy conversation about the trip, the train, and the absurdity of high-end deck plans from people who never had a hammer. I mean really, Doris said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. They were measuring for a pergola like the sky was theirs. Never laid aboard, Evelyn replied. Never paid a dime. They clinked coffee cups. Victory never needed fireworks, just the right amount of silence and truth. Later that night, Evelyn sat on her balcony, sketchbook in her lap, drawing the faint outlines of pine trees and train tracks from memory. The sky was purple at the edges, the kind of dusky hue that felt earned. She glanced at the empty jar on her windowsill. Clean, clear. In its place she set a small potted cactus, a gift from Doris years ago, the kind of plant that asked for nothing, and kept surviving anyway. She felt for the first time in years like she was no longer borrowing her life from someone else's comfort. Her email pinged just before bed. A quiet chime. One new message. From Marcy Nguyen, subject. Estate planning. Follow-up. Hi Evelyn. Now that the sale has closed and the funds are secure, I wanted to ask, would you like to revisit your estate plan? We can discuss options if you're ready. Best, Marcy. Evelyn stared at the screen, her reflection faint in the black bezel. Her hand hovered over the mouse. Yes, she whispered. It's time to write a new ending. The conference room smelled like lemon polish and fresh ink, everything neatly stacked, numbered, and waiting. Marcy sat at the end of the long oak table, reading glasses perched at the tip of her nose, a thick binder open in front of her. You sure you're ready for this? She asked softly. Evelyn sat straighter in her chair, hands folded calmly on the tabletop. Her shoulders no longer ached with tension. Her voice was steady. I was ready the day they handed me a check for milk I never received. Marcy gave a single nod and turned the page. Let's begin. The old will had been drafted 10 years ago, a tidy list of conventional intentions, the duplex to Todd, savings split evenly, jewelry marked for Candace, even a provision for future grandchildren who never arrived. Marcy slid it aside like expired paperwork. We'll revoke it in full, she said, tapping the fresh stack of pages. This one carries your real name. Evelyn didn't flinch as she signed. Her pen moved without pause through the declaration, the revocation, and finally the distribution. Her modest estate, carefully tended over years of quiet thrift, would now go in 2 parts. 50% to the house at Willow Ridge, a non-profit domestic violence shelter on the east side of town. A place Evelyn had donated to in small amounts for years, but never publicly. The other half, in full, to Doris Flynn. No caveats. No apologies. She's been the family I didn't birth, Evelyn said simply, capping the pen. Marcy looked up, eyes soft. They won't take this well. They've never handled Grace well, either. Evelyn tucked the signed document into her handbag. Let them struggle with something unfamiliar. Outside, the sky was bright but not blinding, a soft blue stretch of calm. The breeze carried the scent of fresh bread from the corner bakery and the faintest trace of sun-warmed asphalt. Evelyn didn't take the bus home. She walked. Each step down the tree-lined sidewalk felt a little freer, her gait looser, arms relaxed at her sides. She passed a flower stand outside the co-op and paused without thinking. Tulips, she said aloud. To no one. Yellow. The vendor, a girl with chipped nail polish and an easy smile, wrapped the stems in brown paper. Special occasion. Yes, Evelyn replied, pressing a bill into her hand. I just gave away everything that ever weighed me down. Back in her apartment, she trimmed the stems and set the tulips in a glass vase by the window. Light filtered in through the sheer curtains, casting yellow shadows across the hardwood floor. She didn't turn on the TV. She didn't reach for her phone. She sat by the window instead, tea in hand, watching the petals quiver gently in the breeze. It was the kind of silence that had nothing to do with loneliness and everything to do with arrival. Later, as twilight curled along the edges of the room, Evelyn opened her mail. Most of it was junk. Credit card offers, a coupon for a meal delivery service she'd never use. But one envelope was handwritten, the return address stamped in small block letters. The house at Willow Ridge. She opened it slowly, careful not to tear the envelope. Inside was a folded card and a note written in looping penmanship. Dear Miss Moore, we were stunned and deeply moved by your unexpected gift. In a world where so many women arrive with nothing, you've made room for hope. Your legacy will help rebuild lives. With immense gratitude, Marianne Keller. Director Evelyn read it twice, then again slower. Her thumb ran gently across the word hope. She thought of the countless hours Candace had spent curating photos of things she hadn't earned. Jewelry brunches, home upgrades. She thought of Todd's indifference dressed up as exhaustion. His passive entitlement, their silence when she'd asked for so little. They had expected the world, and now they had none of hers. The box of supplies shifted in Evelyn's arms as she approached the shelter's entrance, not heavy, but grounded with purpose. The cardboard edges pressed into her forearms with every step. On the side she'd written in marker, housewarming, from a stranger who understands. Willow Ridge didn't look like much from the outside. Pale brick, peeling trim, a front door painted blue like someone had tried to bring hope in with a brush. But inside, the air was warm with something Evelyn hadn't expected, laughter. Children's voices echoed faintly down the hallway. A woman at the front desk glanced up and smiled before Evelyn could even introduce herself. Miss Moore. Evelyn nodded. You're early. Come on in. Marianne's waiting for you. Marianne Keller greeted her with a two-handed shake, the kind that felt like both welcome and gratitude. Her eyes were tired but kind, and her sweater sleeves were rolled to the elbows like she was always in motion. You didn't have to bring anything, Marianne said, easing the box out of Evelyn's arms. Your gift already changed everything. I wanted to meet the people, Evelyn replied, brushing her hands against her coat. I didn't come for thanks. I came for faces. Then come see, Marianne said, leading her past a bulletin board filled with sticky notes. Today I chose peace. I woke up sober. I said no. Evelyn paused in front of one that read, I am not what they did to me. She swallowed hard and followed. The community room buzzed with quiet energy, two toddlers chasing each other around a beanbag chair. A group of women folding laundry and laughing over something whispered. Evelyn took it all in. The scent of clean linen, warm oatmeal, crayons, and cocoa. These are women in transition, Marianne said softly. They left homes that hurt them. Most had nowhere to go. Evelyn nodded. She didn't ask for stories. She knew pain when she saw it worn like a second skin. A young woman with a baby on her hip approached. Her hair was pulled into a high bun, her eyes ringed with fatigue but steady. I'm Leah, she said. They said you're the one who... She glanced down at the box being unpacked. We've never had matching mugs before. Evelyn smiled gently. Everyone deserves something that feels like home. Leah's lips quirked. Even if you have to build it with strangers? Especially then. They stood in comfortable silence as the baby reached toward Evelyn's scarf, grabbing a corner and giggling. Evelyn let her tug, her hand steady against the little fingers. Did you lose someone too? Leah asked quietly. Not exactly. Evelyn said, I let some people go. And that turned out to be the same thing. On the ride home, Doris kept dabbing the corner of her eye with a tissue she swore she wasn't using. I didn't think it would hit me like that, she said. Voice rough. All those women just starting with nothing, and you gave them a beginning. Evelyn stared out the window. I kept holding on to the idea that I had to pass something down, to blood, to names, but I was really just feeding expectation. And now? Doris asked. Now I've fed purpose. They drove in silence for a few blocks. I wish Wayne could have seen it, Evelyn murmured. Doris reached over, hand resting lightly on hers. He'd be proud, not just of what you did, but of who you became doing it. Back home, Evelyn made a cup of ginger tea, her hands still warm from where Leah's baby had held her scarf. She sat by the window, the sun low in the sky, and reached for her laptop. Her cursor hovered over the Amtrak page again. A scenic route from St. Paul to Alaska. Mountains, glaciers, a sky too big to hold on to. She didn't need a reason anymore. The chapter she'd closed had been replaced with something far richer, not family by blood, but family by gratitude, resilience, and new roots. She scrolled to the bottom of the page. Round trip. Private cabin. April departure. She clicked confirm. The screen flashed green, and Evelyn whispered, "Now it's just me." And the road ahead. The train groaned to life beneath them, steel wheels grinding softly as it rolled out of St. Paul's Union Depot. Evelyn felt the vibration in her spine before the view even began to move. The platform slipped away in slow motion, families waving, coffee cups steaming in the morning chill, lives staying still while hers finally began to move. She sat in the window seat with Doris beside her, two overnight bags stashed neatly at their feet, a thick plaid blanket stretched across their laps. "You nervous?" Doris asked, raising a brow over the rim of her travel mug. Evelyn glanced out the window. Already the city was giving way to frost-licked fields and pine clusters dark with morning mist. "No," she said. "I'm finally not." They reached the observation car by mid-morning, where the glass arched overhead like a cathedral dome, letting light pour down on the carpeted aisle. Mountains hadn't yet appeared, but the land was changing, wider, deeper, quieter. Evelyn carried her sketchpad, a mechanical pencil tucked behind her ear. She settled into a front-facing seat with Doris beside her, both of them sipping coffee from ceramic Amtrak mugs. The scent of cinnamon rolls drifted in from the dining car. Someone behind them was softly playing a harmonica, out of tune but somehow perfect. Doris nudged her gently. "So this is what freedom looks like." Evelyn smiled, setting her coffee down. "It's what it feels like." She opened her sketchpad and started tracing a horizon line across the top of the page. The landscape began to rise after lunch. Hills turned to jagged edges, snow dusting their tips like sifted sugar. Evelyn's pencil moved in graceful strokes, capturing the bold curve of a pine-covered ridge and the delicate shadows between the peaks. She lost time in the drawing. Her fingers moved with purpose, but her breath, that's what changed. It came easier here, slower, deeper. No phones ringing, no side eyes from across a duplex, no text bubbles full of apologies dressed as guilt. Just trees, sky, wind, and the hum of forward motion. At one point Doris leaned over and whispered, "You know what this is?" "What?" "The best damn trip you never owed anyone." Evelyn looked up, startled. Then a slow laugh escaped her lips. Rich, unguarded. "Exactly," she said, tapping her pencil once on the paper. "Just me." This time. They didn't speak after that. They didn't need to. Evening painted the windows gold and lavender. As the train wound its way past glacial lakes and frozen creeks, Evelyn stared into the distance like she was watching her old life shrink behind her, a shrinking dot on the map, irrelevant and unreachable. She thought about Todd and Candace, not with anger anymore, but with finality. Let them fumble through someone else's house now. Let them chase Pinterest-perfect dreams with no foundation beneath them. She had already released them, from her life, her will, her peace. Later, back in their sleeper cabin, Doris dozed with her mouth slightly open, snoring just loud enough to make Evelyn smirk. She slipped her headphones in and listened to a jazz playlist, the bass soft and soothing in her ears. Her sketchpad rested on her lap, now full of peaks and valleys, line work layered with shadows that only freedom could draw. She picked up her pen one last time, and wrote in the corner of the page, "Ridgeway Line, April. The day I returned to myself." She closed the pad gently, sat still, let the rumble beneath her carry every thought forward. No ghosts, no guilt, no one needing her but herself. The train whistled low as they crossed into Montana. The sky stretched out forever in every direction, the kind of sky you couldn't describe, only feel. Evelyn leaned her forehead against the cool glass, her breath fogging the edges. She wasn't running. She wasn't escaping. She was arriving. They wouldn't buy me groceries, so I sold the roof over their diamonds.